The rain had not stopped for 2 days in the small suburb of Westfield, New Jersey. It fell softly against the windows of the modest house at the end of a quiet lane. Inside, Margaret sat by the window, her hands clasped together, watching the drops chase one another down the glass. Her eyes were heavy with thoughts she could not name, her heart heavy with love she could no longer carry. Her husband, Charles, was asleep on the couch. His body, once strong and full of life, was now frail and tired. Years of overwork, disappointment, and quiet regrets had aged him beyond his years. The room smelled faintly of detergent, Margaret's scent, the one that clung to every shirt she washed, every floor she scrubbed, every pillow she fluffed. She was a maid by profession, but her heart had once belonged to a man who owned the world. And his name was Ethan Cole, a billionaire, a man with the kind of charm that could melt frost and turn silence into symphonies. But Ethan wasn't here, not now, not anymore. Margaret sighed softly and turned from the window. Her fingers brushed over the ring Charles had given her 10 years ago. It wasn't gold or diamond, just a thin silver band that had long since faded from shine. But she wore it still, because love, no matter how worn, was still love. She whispered, almost to herself, we all make choices, and sometimes, we spend our lives living with them. 10 years earlier, Margaret had walked through the towering gates of the Cole estate for the first time. She was 25, nervous, and broke. Her mother had just passed away, and her father, a man lost to gambling and despair, had left her nothing but debts. She needed a job, any job, so when the agency called, telling her that the richest man in New York needed a new maid for his mansion in the Hamptons, she didn't hesitate. The first time she saw Ethan Cole, he was standing on the balcony overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, the wind tugging at his hair. He was tall, graceful, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in another world, a world built of marble and glass. Mr. Cole, she had said, bowing slightly. I'm Margaret, the new maid. He turned to her then, eyes dark but not unkind. Margaret, he repeated, as though tasting her name. You may call me Ethan. Everyone else does. He smiled faintly, a smile that would later undo her entire life. Margaret worked quietly, keeping to herself, but Ethan noticed her. She was different from the others, humble, gentle, with a kindness that seemed out of place in the world of the wealthy. She didn't gossip, didn't flirt, didn't seek favors. She only worked, with dignity, with care, with silent strength. One evening, while cleaning his study, she accidentally knocked over a frame. It was a picture of Ethan and a woman, beautiful, elegant, distant. My fiancé, he said softly behind her, making her jump. She left me 2 months ago. Margaret stammered an apology, but Ethan just smiled sadly. Don't worry, people leave when they can't love the way you do. She didn't understand what he meant then, but she would. Weeks turned into months. The mansion no longer felt like a workplace but a story unfolding, one written in stolen glances and quiet conversations. Ethan began to seek her company, in the mornings, over coffee, in the evenings, by the piano. He would ask her about her life, her dreams, her thoughts about the world. She would listen when he spoke of his loneliness, his burdens, his endless meetings that meant nothing. Sometimes, he said one night, I think money is just another kind of prison. People think it gives you everything, but it only teaches you how much you can lose. She looked at him with empathy that could have healed any wound. Then, maybe what you need isn't more, she said softly, but less. He smiled at her words, a small, real smile that reached his eyes. That night, something shifted between them. It wasn't passion, not yet. It was tenderness, the kind that grows like a seed in the heart, unnoticed, until it's too late to uproot. But love is dangerous when it crosses boundaries, and their world was built on them. When Ethan reached out one night, gently brushing a tear from her cheek, Margaret froze. His touch lingered, gentle, questioning, and then he kissed her, slow and searching, as if asking permission to exist in her heart. It was the kind of kiss that rewrites destinies. But destiny doesn't forgive easily. Their love grew in shadows. No one in the mansion knew, or perhaps they all did, but pretended not to see. For a while, it felt like something sacred, something only they could understand. He would send her flowers hidden beneath the laundry cart, leave notes on her pillow when she changed his sheets. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves. One afternoon, as Margaret was leaving the estate, a black car pulled up beside her. Inside was a woman, tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in white. Ethan's ex-fiancée, Vanessa. You're the maid, Vanessa said with an icy smile, and you're sleeping with him. Margaret's hands trembled. It's not. Don't insult me, Vanessa cut her off. I know men like him. He'll get bored. He'll forget you. But you," she leaned closer, "you'll remember this shame forever." The words stung deeper than she expected. Margaret ran home that night, crying silently into her pillow. Ethan came later, worried, but she couldn't look at him the same way. "Tell me this is love," she whispered, "not loneliness." He held her, silent, and in his silence, she heard the truth. The next morning, she left the mansion without saying goodbye. 2 years passed. Margaret married Charles, a simple man who worked as a mechanic. He wasn't rich, or brilliant, or extraordinary, but he was kind. He laughed easily. He looked at her the way men look when they believe they've found safety in a world that keeps breaking them. She told herself she was lucky, that love didn't have to be fire, it could be warmth. That peace was enough. They lived modestly in a rented home. She cleaned houses for a living, sometimes humming quietly as she worked. But every now and then, when she saw a car like Ethan's or smelled a perfume that reminded her of that mansion by the sea, something inside her ached, something deep and unhealed. Charles adored her, but he could sense the distance in her eyes. Sometimes, at night, when she thought he was asleep, he would whisper into the darkness, "Whoever you're thinking about, I hope he knows what he lost." She pretended not to hear. It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind of day that blurs past and present. Margaret had just finished cleaning a hotel suite when she saw him again. Ethan, standing by the elevator, in a charcoal coat, looking as though the years had never touched him, yet his eyes told a different story. They were tired, sad, searching. Their eyes met. For a long, trembling second, neither spoke. The world slowed down. The hum of the elevator faded. It was just them, the maid and the billionaire, bound by memories too heavy to name. "Margaret," he finally said, "it's really you." Her heart fluttered painfully. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "I own this hotel," he said with a small, almost embarrassed smile. "And you clean it." The words hurt, but not because they were cruel, because they were true. He took a step closer. "I've thought about you every day for years." "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't." "Why not?" His voice broke. "Why can't we admit what we had was real?" "Because it doesn't matter anymore," she said, turning away. "I'm married." He was silent for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. "To a man who doesn't know what you're capable of giving." Tears filled her eyes. "He doesn't need to know. He just needs me to stay." And then she left, because sometimes love isn't about staying. It's about walking away before it destroys what's left of you. Months passed, but fate wasn't done with them. Charles fell ill, a heart condition the doctors called manageable, but money called impossible. Medical bills piled up faster than she could count. Margaret worked day and night, cleaning houses, scrubbing hotel floors, doing laundry for strangers. One evening, when she came home exhausted, she found an envelope on the table. Inside was a check, enough to pay all the bills. No name, no message. She didn't need one. Ethan had found her again. She sat there, trembling, tears spilling down her cheeks. When Charles saw her crying, he took her hand gently. "Who gave you this?" She couldn't answer. "Margaret," he said quietly, "you don't owe me honesty, but you owe yourself peace." His words were kind, but his eyes were full of knowing pain. He knew, he had always known. That night, as she watched him sleep, she realized what love really meant. It wasn't the fire that burned between her and Ethan. It was this, the quiet endurance of a man who loved her despite her ghosts. Still, she couldn't throw the check away. She used it, because love, even when broken, still saves. A year later, Charles's health worsened. The doctors said there wasn't much time left. On his last night, the rain returned, soft and cold. Margaret held his hand by the bedside, tears silent and endless. "Margaret," he whispered weakly, "you've always been somewhere else, I know. But it's okay, you loved me in your own way. And that's enough." She bent over him, sobbing. "I did love you, Charles. I still do." He smiled faintly. "Then promise me something, anything. When you see him again," he whispered, "don't run this time." And with that, his hand slipped from hers. The room fell quiet, except for the sound of rain. Months passed before she saw Ethan again. He came to the funeral, standing quietly at the back of the church, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. After the service, he approached her. "I didn't mean for it to end this way," he said softly. "If I could trade places with him, I would." She shook her head. "No, don't say that. Charles was good. He taught me what love really is." Ethan's eyes filled with pain. "And what is love, Margaret?" She looked at him, her tears glistening. "Love is the courage to let go, to give, even when you don't receive, to embrace, even when it hurts." He stepped closer, hesitating. Then let me embrace you once more. And she did. For the first time in years, she let herself fall into his arms. It wasn't passion that held them together this time. It was grief, forgiveness, memory. It was everything they had been and everything they could never be. They stood like that for a long time, two souls bound by love and loss, clinging to a moment that would fade like the last note of a song. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled through her tears. Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, Margaret, he whispered, his voice trembling. Thank you for teaching me what love feels like, and what it costs. Years later, Margaret sat once again by the window of her small house, watching the rain. Her hair had turned grey, her hands lined and worn, but her heart had found peace. Sometimes she would visit the sea, the same ocean that once separated her from Ethan's world. She would close her eyes and remember the warmth of his embrace, the kindness of Charles's heart, and the way both men had taught her something precious. Ethan had taught her that love can burn so fiercely it blinds. Charles had taught her that love can heal so quietly it saves. And she, Margaret, had learned that both kinds were real. Both kinds were love. As she stood by the water, the wind tugging gently at her shawl, she whispered to the sea, we were all just trying to love, in the only ways we knew how. The waves answered in their soft rhythm, eternal and forgiving. And somewhere, perhaps in another life, the maid and the billionaire might have found their forever. But in this life, she smiled faintly, because she had already found hers. In the end, love did not triumph with fireworks or forever promises. It lingered, quiet, haunting, eternal, in memories, in sacrifices, in the gentle power of an embrace that healed more than it destroyed. Margaret's story was not about choosing one man over another. It was about learning that love, in all its forms, passionate or patient, fleeting or faithful, leaves us changed. And sometimes, that change is enough.